Radical optimism is the reason many of us traded the status quo for the fragility of the frontier. That, and to be honest, the hope of many, many bags. Hello, my name is Miss Purple. Welcome to a new calendar year, and this is an article that I wrote, or rather I started writing, while at Edge City, Patagonia. I was sitting in a cute little cafe in San Martin de los Andes in Argentina. I had just come from a privacy workshop and I felt confident, utterly confident that I was living in a successful experiment at the edge of possibility. By the time I got home, I brushed it off, pushed it back, and I thought it was too radical. And that's when it hit me. I'm the edge. At least within my circle of influence, I'm the literal definition of the radical edge. So, here we are. In this essay article, as you can see by the title, I'm going to attempt to show you why living on the edge of the Solarpunks, the Afrofuturists, and the Cypherpunks is, in my opinion, one of the best ways to experience the connected freedom that we desperately crave. It's also why we still believe in the promise and the power of community. For a bit of backstory, I was born to a land that many consider to be the edge of ideals and norms. On paper, our sheer existence makes no sense to some. I mean, how are you a country completely surrounded by a whole other country? Story for a different day. Some might even conclude that we should have been consumed by a people larger in number and by those with deeper pockets. And yet, we persisted. In a way, Lesotho and its people, nestled in a mountain kingdom that insists on continuing to defy to some extent external power, buckling under its own economic weight but somehow continuing forward like a protagonist locked into their own character revolution, that, to me, is the symbol of the would-be Cypher Solarpunk. It's the grit, the audacity, even when everything seems like a theater act. That same defiance lives at the frontier of our digital age. Technology, as we know today, seeks to stretch and pull at the very seams of humanity. It promises convenience, ingenuity, opportunity, borderlessness, but it begs us to remember that everything has a price. In paying that price, we become the cogs in the machine, helping turn rivers into data centers and lives into credits. We become the death of human tangibility. Now, I know that sounds very morbid, but what that means in practice is that more and more of our social life is translated into numbers. On paper, it's whatever. IG, Facebook, X, TikTok, they have all helped normalize this, so we're used to it. Work becomes ratings, trust becomes a credit score, and attention becomes engagement metrics. Once something is quantified, it becomes easy to compare, rank, and optimize it. That is useful for platforms and institutions, but it gradually teaches us as humans, as people, as participants within this game, to see ourselves less as subjects and more as data points. Within this tension between convenience and cost, someone once called me an abolitionist. A bit of definition. An abolitionist is a person who advocates for the complete elimination of a specific institution or practice. The term's meanings obviously shifts depending on the context, but it inherently implies an uncompromising opposition, not reform, to a targeted institution. That means I don't just want things to change, I want them to be overhauled. Perhaps I am one. Perhaps because I'm a firm believer that development or profit should not come before humanity, but this essay is not about me. Or even just you. It's about us. It's about all of us. But I mention that because if you do not believe in the ideals of freedom, of autonomy, of liberation, justice, or cultural relevance, you will not enjoy the rest of this article. But I beg you to read it still. Or listen on the Cypherpunks.
But the cypherpunk saying is transparency for the powerful, privacy for the weak. So we should have not identities, not soul-bound tokens, not complete nonsense like DIDs or various authoritarian technology claiming to be self-sovereign like this self-sovereign identity nonsense, but we should instead support zero-knowledge proofs and anonymous credentials that enable selective disclosure. I really wish people would just not put the word self-sovereign in front of fascist technology and be like, oh, it makes it all better. Someone in the last session said, when should we add privacy to the network in Ethereum? I would say, what better time than now, and what better people than you all out there?
Lately, the buzz on X is that privacy is kind of hot now, which we love. Privacy is, as the Cypherpunks put it, a fundamental right. It is, for the cypherpunk, a precondition for authentic existence against structures that render us transparent, commodified, or predictable. It's not secrecy. In that world, the act of encrypting an email is almost a philosophical gesture. Privacy for the cypherpunks is always a prerequisite. It's an insistence that the individual remains a space of unmediated possibility, not reducible to data or algorithmic expectation. This fundamental right knows no bounds. It applies to every human, geography and affiliations be damned. Now, as I see it, the aim with the cypherpunks is to build systems where privacy and autonomy do not depend on trusting a government or a corporation. Encryption, non-custodial wallets, and open protocols are ways of making that structurally true. The reason this matters is that power asymmetries are now built into information flows. That is, if one side can observe, profile, and predict the other side with almost no friction, that knowledge quickly becomes leverage over money, mobility, association, and even expression. Cypherpunk culture is an attempt to narrow that asymmetry at the protocol level instead of hoping that individual behavior will alone fix it, because it won't. We lost our minds over Bitcoin because it symbolized a radical break from centralized control, giving rise to new ideas of autonomy and relentless debates about surveillance, power, and the contours of freedom. In pop culture, the cypherpunk is often animated and fluid. They live in the phrase of the dystopian thriller, in the shadows of the high-tech utopia, where every new world carries the seeds of total surveillance. But they resist. They hold their fundamental right to humanity tight. They refuse to concede beyond a few marginal adaptations. This is more than a narrative. It's a resonance of our desire for resistance, autonomy, and the struggle to define ourselves in a world that changes faster than I change my hair. The need to make Ethereum cypherpunk thus grows daily on the Solarpunks.
Dear Alice, this place is yours now. It's a handful, but nothing worth doing is easy. The land is more than just dirt. If you look after it, it will feed you forever. You're a smart one. I know you'll be okay come rain or shine. And remember, a business is only as good as its people, so treat them well. Our job is to plant seeds so our grandkids get to enjoy the fruit. So, eat well, Alice, and keep planting those seeds. Because how we eat today feeds tomorrow.
Across the other end of the cypherpunk is the Solarpunk, a visionary not of endless resistance but of collective renewal. Here, optimism is born of struggle. It believes that humanity can, in fact, reinvent itself. But there is still hope. That a few well-intentioned adjustments can put us on the path that recognizes the ebb and flow of life and the necessity for old wisdom to be revisited. For me, the Solarpunk protagonist is a hacker of the future. Survival here is for community and not pure personal gain. Solarpunk, in that sense, is a systems-level critique of extractive infrastructure. It assumes that the current organization of energy, food, and information is not technologically inevitable, but politically and economically configured. In other words, we made it up. By prioritizing decentralized, resilient, and regenerative arrangements, it asks how communities can reduce dependence on distant, opaque institutions, how we can be self-reliant. Sort of. Transposed into crypto, this is where regenerative finance, public goods funding, local or mission-driven DAOs make sense. The question is not simply how to generate yield, but what kinds of socio-technical systems that yield is reinforcing. Once that externalized cost, or ones that actually improve the material and ecological conditions they run on. The solarpunk movement, while still relatively slow to grow, is beginning to infiltrate mainstream gaming and online culture through survivalist games, lifestyle influencers, and adjacent trends like small raised bed gardenings and DIY kombuchas. They're the evolved descendants of hippie idealism, the pragmatic dreamers. Now, radical optimism, which is the relentless conviction that there is always a possibility for better, demands that we ask, why not now? And why not us? To be solarpunk, to be an Afrofuturist, to be a cypherpunk, is to choose radical optimism not as a feeling, but as a practice. It's to guard our autonomy like it's sacred, to build sustainable, decentralized futures collaboratively, and to resist the constant invitation to become another cog, another data point, or another product. It is to be absolute in one's resolve that yes, there must be a way to do better than this. There has to be. We may not have found it just yet, but it's like Schrodinger's cat. There remains the possibility of life. On the Afrofuturists.
Black Panther works as Afrofuturism because it engages with these notions of the future through the traditions of the African continent. It invests in a deeper understanding of what it means to be African, what it means to be a person of African descent, and it allows us to look forward into the future through those traditions without the interruptions of colonialism. Wakanda, the futuristic nation that sits at the heart of Black Panther as a film, presents an Africa without that.
In case it wasn't obvious, I'm a proponent of Afrofuturism, which is a movement standing at the junction of liberation, technology, and imagination. Sounds so cliche, but it's cliche for a reason. Now hear me out. At its core, Afrofuturism envisions a future shaped through autonomy and technological innovation, while staying anchored to culture and historical experience. I mean, yes, it's quite out there, but that's the point. The visualization of Black protagonists flying spaceships and using futuristic tech daily is a radical and dramatic response to the status quo that exists in too many spaces to count. When mainstream pop culture gave us Black Panther, or when Janelle Monáe built entire Afrofuturistic mythologies for their albums, they weren't just crafting drama or visually pleasing art. They were daring to reclaim our power to dream and to explore. We are redefining what liberation means in this new world. Afrofuturism operates as both aesthetic practice and political theory. It refuses the assumption that technological futures are culturally neutral or automatically universal. Instead, it foregrounds how race, colonial history, and power shape who is imagined as a user, a citizen, or a protagonist of innovation. This has concrete implications. If the people designing protocols, platforms, and AI systems do not account for Afro and global majority experiences as central use cases, those systems will reproduce existing exclusions at scale. Afrofuturism functions as a corrective lens in this case, insisting that any credible future of technology must accommodate and be accountable to communities that previous regimes treated as expendable. The execution of all of this is hella daunting, but if radical optimism is what gets us where we need to go, then the ethos of the Cypher Solar Afropunk is the how. Even if some, like a host on the Chopping Blog podcast, think it's all dead. As we grapple with legacies of hypersurveillance and creative and physical exploitation, the cypherpunk movement still rings true for this new world. To be on the edge of the new world now means choosing technology that serves liberation over control. Unless, of course, you're directly benefiting from this control bias. Then the story is different. It's at this meeting point between the cypherpunks' encrypted dreams, the solarpunks' green revolutionary ideals, and the Afrofuturist cosmic visions that we truly find that edge. The stories and philosophies of the cypherpunks, the solarpunks, and the Afrofuturists aren't just abstract ideas. They're alive in how we build, resist, and dream. If you take anything from this essay article, let it be this. We have permission to demand more from our tech, our communities, and our future. We don't have to accept narratives that erase our story, nor should we be content with futures built for someone else's profit or power at the cost of our autonomy, our freedoms, and our ability to imagine, we can and truly should lean towards securing our privacy. Whether it's with Fileverse, Tor browsers over Chrome, we should support decentralized and regen projects like Gainforest and Project Mocha, participate in public goods funding with the likes of Octant and Gitcoin. I think we can do all of this and still make the bags that we ironically need to thrive, because everything is everything and nothing is exempt from improvement. It's not as easy as it should be, but we can try. Make Ethereum cypherpunk, especially in a world that insists on a bottomless pit of manufactured despair. May the work of your hands flow with ease. And that is all for this specific article. If you enjoyed it, leave a comment, leave a like, or share it with a friend. I would like to hear more of what you think. See you in the next one. Bye.